Welcome to Last Book Alive. Today, I am talking with a very special friend, Reem al-Jabi, whom I've known for a very, very long time, and who was one of my first guests, actually. Hi, Denise, and Faye. So people are joining us live. So Reem was one of my first, she was my first guest, and we discussed Sabria Damascus Bittersweet. Reem is from Syria, from Damascus, and that episode was not, we were not able to record it live on our video. So I'm really glad that we're able to do this now. And Reem also was one of the people who joined me for our reading of the Gaza monologues back in December. So Reem, I wanted to just ask you a request if you could please introduce yourself before we start.
Thank you, Mahir. Thank you for having me on your podcast again. So I'm Reem al-Jabi. As Mahir told you, I'm from Syria, and I'm also Tunisian. My husband's Tunisian, and I'm in Tunisia. And as Mahir said, I've known Mahir for over 20 years. We studied together at University of East Anglia. We did our masters together in development. I did mine in gender analysis and development. So I'm a gender specialist, especially in the MENA region. And I've worked ever since with a lot of international organizations, UN and other agencies. And I'm happy to be discussing literature, and especially Palestinian literature, which is something that I started off with studying and as a hobby. So thank you for having me, Mahir.
You're most welcome, Reem, and we're really, I'm so grateful, and everybody who's watching and who will be watching is so grateful that you're here joining us, because you provide a perspective from that region, and being a poet and a writer yourself, that aspect is also like helpful to us in understanding Palestinian culture as well as literature. So welcome. So today we're discussing a novella called All That's Left to You, and we're going to be talking about it, and it's by Ghassan Kanafani. And Kanafani was a Palestinian writer, as well as a political activist. And I wanted to talk a little bit about his life before we might hand it over to you, and we can, start our discussion. And I'm very curious about his links with Damascus, which I will ask you about in a bit. So, why I wanted to talk about before I talk about Kanafani, I wanted to just talk about Prisoner Day, which is observed on the 17th of April. And since it is April, I thought that I could just discuss that in the context also of our discussion of Kanafani. So, and the reason why I'm talking about it is because there's so many events in Palestinian history, and they're so important. So, while we talk about literature, it's equally important to understand the context in which that literature was written. And Palestinian Prisoner Day and its observation is one of those aspects of Palestinian history which is important. The reason being that, so it's on April 17th every year. And the reason is that, there are about 9,500 Palestinians from Gaza and West Bank in Israeli prisons. And actually, post October 7th, about 16 Palestinians who've been detained in Israeli prisons have died. And 350 children have been arrested since the beginning of 2003. So this Prisoner Day that actually started, it was started, I didn't write the year when it was started, but the reason that it was started was that for the Palestinian prisoner Mahmoud Bakr Hijazi, he was the first Palestinian prisoner to be released, and it was during the first prisoner exchange between Palestinians and Israelis. And so that's why from that day on, people started to note this as Prisoner Day and to express their solidarity with, Arab prisoners and Palestinian prisoners who had been detained by Israel. So yeah, and now I wanted to just move on to Kanafani. Um, so Kanafani was born in Akka in Mandatory Palestine on April 9th, 1936. And like Darwish, whom we discussed last time, I discussed it with my friend Mahiti, that, even like Darwish, he was displaced. He was forced out of his home during the Nakba of 1948. And, his family moved around, but then settled in Damascus in Syria, the capital of Syria. And he joined University of Damascus in 1952. Before I move on to talk more about his life, Reem, I wanted to ask you, um, do you know anything about, about where Damascus, him and his family lived, or anything about his life in Damascus?
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's interesting. So yes, he, as you rightly said, between two brackets, prisoners they started in 1974. So and as you said, because of
1974. Okay.
yeah, and as you rightly said, because of the release of the exchange release. So, as you rightly said, Ghassan Kanafani was born in Akkar in 1936. In 1948, when the Nakba started, when Israel took over Palestine and the state of Israel was declared, he was 12 years old. He was living in Jaffa with his family at that time, and were forced to leave. They were forced to leave. So they left to first to Lebanon, stayed a while, and then they went to Damascus, as you said.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly where in Damascus he was. We know that he lived in an old house, but I wasn't able to obtain exactly where in the old house. But what I do know that in Damascus, in 1953, he was able to obtain his intermediate school certificate.
Okay.
And based on that, he was able to work at honor school, at an honor-based school as an art teacher. Because there were two things Ghassan Kanafani was good at: writing, Arabic, and art. So he was equally good. He only taught. I mean, he only taught. He had some scripts were he used in his novella, but no, he didn't take it up further. I mean, I think it's also the lack of time. He was so engaged in politics and in as a literature that I don't think he had time for his art. But I know he appreciated art, and there was a very good story of when he met Najil Ali. And for those who don't know Najil Ali is the most famous Palestinian cartoonist. Who draws about the Palestinian cause in cartoon, and he's he's claimed as one of the 10 best cartoonists in the world. He's well known, and unfortunately, like Ghassan Kanafani, Najil Ali was also assassinated.
So he was a Palestinian refugee in Syria, in Damascus, and I believe it was through UNRWA that he found work, and he earned his teacher certificate in Damascus. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But one of the important also aspect of his life in Syria was that Ghassan had an elder sister. She's like 8 years older than him, called Faiza. Just to remember, his father's name is Faiz, so his sister is called Faiza. And Faiza obtained her certificate in Damascus, and she started teaching. Faiza was teaching in a place called Kara, a small village at that time called Kara, which is 90 kilometers north of Damascus. It was an almost remote village. So for a girl to go and teach there, it was a bit difficult. So Ghassan or his other brother Adnan, one of them would, or both of them would go with his sister when she had lessons in Kara, join her, you know, to protect her, kind of a companion to protect her. And it was in Kara, as I said, was a remote village at that time, a poor village. But what he said, that it's a poor village, but at the same time, the people were very kind there. And there where Ghassan really started to write his, but his writing, what he wrote in Kara there wasn't really published. It was his first attempt. He was still a young boy. He didn't have a certificate at that time. But what was interesting is that it was at that time when he was able to depict the characters. He was able to really see inside a character, to have an in-depth side of characters that he met. So this is when he started writing about characters, and he translated the characters into something readable, something that you get attracted to, that there's depth behind the surface of a character. So this is what we know about the important aspect of Ghassan being in Damascus.
In Damascus. How were Palestinian refugees seen in Syria, and how were they treated? This is, I believe, this would be in the 1970s. Right?
No, that's much earlier. No, that's much earlier. That was in the that was straight after 1948. So that's in the late 40s, 50s. Let's see. I mean, I would rather you ask somebody for a Syrian Palestinian, because I'm considered also, although my family, half of it is Palestinian, but we were in Syria ages ago, before 1948. So I'd rather you ask somebody from Syria. But what I can tell you from my friends is that they felt at home in Syria. But at the same time, I meant all Palestinians worldwide, no matter how well they are treated in whatever country they are in, and no matter how well they are treated, they feel homesickness. They feel this urge to go back home, no matter. And this has been, conveyed to generation. So it's not just the generation that left Palestine, but also the generation that came after, you know. But what is for sure that relatively speaking, Palestinians were able to integrate well with the Syrian community, because anyway, I mean, we don't really consider ourselves as different communities. We consider ourselves as one people, you know. So they were able to integrate well. They were in schools. They were in establishment. They had they integrated well in the workforce, in the academic and the literature features of Syria. So I think they integrated well. But still, I'd rather.
Did you know any Palestinians when you were growing up in Damascus?
Oh my God, millions, not millions, thousands, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, of course, especially at university, almost, most of my friends were Palestinians. The thing about Palestinian and why I was really attached, I mean, okay, considering the relative aspect, but also, I mean, don't forget that Palestinians, because they really flourished in terms of culture, in terms of literature. They really concentrated on reading. I mean, everyone at that time were concentrating on reading. But I remember my late aunt, who was the head of the literacy programs in Syria. And so once I asked her, so among the Arab world, who has the best literacy rates? And that was in the 1980s. I was asking her, and she said Palestinians. And the reason why is because they lost everything. They lost their land, they lost their houses, they lost even families. So they concentrated. So the only way they could, make up for that is to concentrate on the future. And the only chances they had was to really, aim a certificate, to obtain education, to obtain knowledge. And also, don't forget, it was a time, and as you know from Ghassan Kanafani, who was a member of the PLPL at that time, were concentrating on reading. But I remember my late aunt, who was the head of the literacy programs in Syria. And so once I asked her, so among the Arab world, who has the best literacy rates? And that was in the 1980s. I was asking her, and she said Palestinians. And the reason why is because they lost everything. They lost their land, they lost their houses, they lost even families. So they concentrated. So the only way they could, make up for that is to concentrate on the future. And the only chances they had was to really, aim a certificate, to obtain education, to obtain knowledge. And also, don't forget, it was a time, and as you know from Ghassan Kanafani, who was a member of the PLPL, and also a member of the national Arab movement. So it was a time when also the cultural aspects, the resistance culture was gaining force. So, so each Palestinian believes it is his or her right to understand what's happening to them, to understand what's to read, to understand the history, to understand even from the approach of know thy enemy, to understand who this enemy is, what their ideology is, what their background. So there was a huge emphasis on education and on knowledge. So this is what really, let's say, the main factors of that time.
Okay.
And that's why I became engaged. I know a lot of friends, because I was really, encouraged to learn more from them and to, understand more than their point of view. Yeah.
Thank you, Reem. Thanks for that. Yeah, so to continue with what we were just about Kanafani's life, to just let people know about it. And Reem, you've covered so much of it already, but just to add to what you were saying, that he joined University of Damascus in Kanafani joined University of Damascus in 1952, but he was expelled. And that was because of his affiliation with the movement of Arab nationalists. And he was recruited to it. I forget the name. He was a Marxist, and also a writer. Habash, George Habash. Anyway, I forgot his name. And
George Habit.
then yeah, and then he after Damascus, he also worked as a teacher in Kuwait. And a lot of his references that he's making to the desert, it references it's rooted in his experience of living in Kuwait. Um, After Kuwait, he in 1961, I don't know if this was in Kuwait, but in 1961 he married a Danish educator and child rights activist, Annie Hover, and they had two children. He continued writing fiction, and in 1962 is when he publishes his most well-known work, which is called Men in the Sun, which is actually about a group of Palestinian refugees from Iraq who go through a desert, cross the desert to go to Kuwait in for better work opportunities, and then what happens to them in that journey. So this was actually one of the work that put him on, I guess, the literary map or the global map. But obviously, he had a following before that, as Reem also said about how early he started writing and experimenting. In 1960, and then he after that he is when he writes All That's Left to You, which is what we will be talking about today, the novella. And it's actually considered to be one of his more experimental works. It's set apart from the other works in terms of experimentation of form, which also we will touch upon. In 1967, this is I would say about 2 years after the publication of All That's Left to You, he joined and became a spokesperson for Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or PFLP. And see, like, this is the thing, like, maybe in the West, the way that people understand it is that a novelist is separate from politics, or that's what it is. Like, I mean, even now, like, Reem, I mean, I'm talking to you now, like, there are student protests happening in the US, and the idea is that, politics has to be separate from education. Like, there's this concept here, or even art or even films, anything, literature has to be separate, a bit between separation between politics and literature. And obviously, I would say that for Palestinians and for the rest of the world, we can't really have that kind of distinction. We can't afford it. Everything that we do has to be informed. Every politics informs everything. Even if we're being experimental, even if we're being, I mean, it's like a integral part of who we are, I think, as people who have been colonized. And then if we talk about Palestinians, people who've been displaced. So he was both a novelist and he was a member of the PFLP. And he said about this of his role as a novelist and his political position. He said, "As far as I'm concerned, politics and the novel are an indivisible case. I can't be separated from it." And in May 1972, PLFP, of which he was a member, as well as three people from the Japanese Red Army, which is a militant communist organization, they attacked what is now the Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, in Tel Aviv, or Tal Rabia, as the Arabic word is Tal Rabia, right? Reem, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah, but they attacked in Al-Lid. It was the Al-Lid airport. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, that killed 26 tourists, and that was widely condemned. And actually, even Kanafani faced a backlash from people who had been supporting him and things like that. After that, he was very close to his niece. His niece's name
Lamis.
was
Lamis.
Lamis, yeah, Lamis. And so Lamis and Kanafani were going to go and apply for admission for Lamis's college. And what happened is that she was talking to him a few days before that, telling him, you should just focus on your writing and not focus on your politics. And he said, the day that I start focusing on only my writing and not politics, my writing is going to go, because there's no writing for me without politics. And the day, July 1972, the day that Kanafani and his niece were about to go and apply for, like admission for her, I believe it was the American University. And what happened is that they were killed by a car bomb that was planted by the Mossad. And the reason why we know it is because Mossad actually claimed responsibility for it a few days later. And Mossad, for those of you who don't know, is the intelligence arm of the state of Israel and has been responsible for a lot of other assassinations, of Palestinian activists as well as other activists. So this was a brief kind of thing about Kanafani's life. Rima, I want to turn it over to you. Do you have any, if you want to add something else?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you mentioned is absolutely what happened. Yes, and I do like the way that you mentioned how his political and his novel, and him being a novelist, interlink. In fact, I mean, I came across one of something he said, which was translated into English, which he said that my political position springs from my being a novelist. So he was asked, and why are you working on politics when you are a novelist? And so he answers that my political position springs from my being a novelist. Insofar as I'm concerned, politics and the novel are an indivisible case, and I can categorically say that I became politically committed because I'm a novelist and not the opposite. So he became a politician because he's a novelist, and it's not the opposite. And in fact, I mean, when he died in one of the obituary by the Lebanon's Daily Star, they described him as the commando who never fired a gun. So he was described. So they were afraid. So it's obvious they were afraid of his words because he never fired a gun. But then, I mean, there was a list of a blacklist of those whom the Mossad wanted to assassinate. So it was no secret. They had a list of the Palestinians activists who they want to assassinate, and not all of them were politicians or commanders. Some of them were actually literature figures. Literary figures. One of them that they wanted to assassinate was the head of the Palestinian Research Center. They had him on the list. And this, I mean, coming back to speaking about Gaza now, this is, I mean, we can see because I mean, we can see it from the hundreds of, I mean, not only did they destroy all universities and all educational faculties and all schools in Gaza, which was their first target, and that was deliberate. That was no mistake. That was deliberate. But they also killed hundreds of Palestinian poets, literary professors, etc. So this is deliberate. This is a way of trying to make the people, you know, illiterate. You know, it's a mean to try to, you know, just to delete the culture, delete education, just leave them in the Stone Age. And they said it. I mean, again, not.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to add to what you're saying. What you're describing, it's called. I've heard this even on this thing, scholasticide, which is the systematic obliteration of education through the arrest, detention, or killing of teachers, students, and staff, and the destruction of educational infrastructure. But I would say also added to that is the killing of literary, you know, figures and scholars as well. Please continue. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I read that word yesterday also, and was surprised that there is such a word. So Mahmoud Darwish in 1974 wrote an elegy, and he said, "They blew you up as they blew up a front, a base, a mountain, a capital, and they fought you as they fight an army, because you are a symbol, a wounded civilization." So this is a part of the elegy that was written by Mahmoud Darwish in 1974 for Ghassan Kanafani. So yeah, it was a great loss. I mean, his absence for a while, it seemed that it was muted, that he became muted, but absolutely not. Absolutely not. His absence actually gained his rightful place in the landscape of our spirit, and speaking about the place and non-place, where it's intertwined in the place that we live and in the non-place abstract ideas that we have. So even I mean, Edward Said in his memoir, he wrote, he said of him that out of place. When he wrote about Mahmoud Darwish, he wrote out of place, for, you know, because it shows the encapsulation the polarity of home and exile that Ghassan Kanafani was writing about, and it's the heart of the Palestinian
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, and that actually ties really well into the next question that I was going to ask you. And by the way, thank you for reading that elegy from Mahmoud Darwish to Kanafani, because that is also something like I mean, we won't talk about. I mean, we can talk about it, but that is really important. The kind of solidarity and respect that Mahmoud Darwish and Ghassan Kanafani had for each other. Like one of the articles that I was reading, it was about this American scholar who goes to meet Kanafani, and Kanafani tells him go away to America and like protest the Vietnam War there. You know, you can be of use there. And you know, the scholar is upset, and then and then Kanafani says, you know, actually, if you want to understand the future of Palestine, you should look to the Palestine of poetry of Mahmoud Darwish. So thank you for reading that. Why did you suggest that we read Ghassan Kanafani, and how did you come to find out about him? How did you come to know about him?
Okay, lovely. So how I came to about to find about Kanafani was at school actually. I was just back from England. I mean, as you know, I spent my childhood in England, and I came back. I was in grade 8 in Syria, and we had to read Ghassan Kanafani. You know, we had it as our reading list for a whole year. And we read, it was the series was called حق لا يموت, right that doesn't die. And it includes the land of the sad orange trees, oranges, and it includes Sad. So this is I mean, I was just barely learning Arabic when we had to read the story. And I think the way that our teacher presented the story, and she linked it straight away with how, you know, it's speaking about exile and shaping the notion of Palestine, etc. That really got me interested in knowing more about Ghassan Kanafani. And then I read Back to Haifa, Going Back to Haifa. عائد إلى حيفا. This is the first novel actually that I read by myself, يعني, in Arabic. And it really, you know, I mean, we would see now that the story were about the novella that we are about to speak about, all that's left to you, is, yeah, it's a bit complicated. But the other novels, no, they're more straightforward. So it was easy to read them, even for a person like myself who was just barely able to read Arabic. It was easy to read, and it really attracts you, you know. And it tells you in simple way, straightforward ways, what happened to Palestinians, what happened in Palestine.
Which novel are you talking about right now?
Back to Haifa. Going back to Haifa. عائد إلى حيفا, returning to Haifa, or they say returning to Haifa.
And just Haifa, I think in English it's Road to Haifa.
Sometimes it's called Road to Haifa, sometimes it's Returning to Haifa. And it's, I mean, in brief, it's about this family which has to leave Jaffa because it's 1948 and there's bombing everywhere. So in the chaos, they forget their infant baby in Haifa, in the house, and so they can't go back to see him. They only go back to see him like 17 years later, where they discover that Jewish couples have taken their home. They are now living in their home, and they have found their child, and they have brought up their child. So their child now, he said, yes, I know that my adopted parents have told me that I originally belong to an Arab family, but I've been brought up as a Jew. And he's even a part of the Jewish army. You know, the irony about the story is that at the same time, his brother, whom he does not know, is part of the Fida'iyya. which is the Palestinian sort of army. So, which indicates that one day maybe these two brothers would be fighting each other. So it was really, I mean, it was a dialogue, more of a dialogue based novella, which was turned into a film, a very nice film. So when I read it, it really attracts you. It really, you understand what's happening. And don't forget, I mean, as I told you, I have a lot of friends, family members, etc., from Palestine. So they, all this comes together. Ghassan Kanafani is among the first to write of the Nakba and then the Naksa. Nakba was in 1948, was when they were the first exodus from Palestine. And next was the setback, 1967, when the Israeli took extra territories of Palestinian territories, including Gaza, including part of Jerusalem, Al-Quds. So he's the one who really, was able to depict what was happening in Palestine. Everybody who is to read Palestinian literature usually starts with Ghassan Kanafani literature. Also, don't forget that his literature has been translated into a lot of languages. I think 20 at least languages worldwide, and it became well known, especially after he died, unfortunately. But I mean, he became well known. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that you started with Road to Haifa and also Qais, because Qais is, sorry, Saad.
Saad.
Saad, yeah. It's one of the novels, along with All That's Left to You, that one of the scholars that I read, she discussed how women in both Saad and All That's Left to You are depicted in a way that is different from the way that women are usually depicted in Kanafani's writing. So I would be curious to know about Saad, because I haven't read that. I read only All That's Left to You. But before we get get into that, I wanted to now just give people like an idea about the plot of All That's Left to You, so they can follow along with our discussion. So All That's Left to You, it's a novella. It's very short. It's about the center of it is the relationship between a brother and a sister. The brother's name is Hamid and the sister's name is Maryam, and they both live in Gaza. And the novella begins with this huge event in their lives, which is the fact that Maryam gets pregnant out of wedlock, so she's not married, and then gets married to a man called Zakaria, who's the third character in this novella, and how that leads to this kind of complete rupture between the sister and the brother. And it's in a way a division, or not just a fight, but a separation between them that can never be they can never reconcile, in a way, is what we feel. So and then Hamid leaves. He wants to go to Jordan, which is where his mother is, while Maryam stays back and basically is going to try to build a life with Zakaria in their family home. And so it's actually it's a novella, as I said, it's very short, but it's also, in terms of time, it's not a novella that unfolds over a long period of time. It's a very short period of time. It's actually like a little over 12 hours, which is how long it takes to cross the desert from Gaza to get into Jordan. So that's the basic kind of plot of the novella. I just want to add that there are two other characters in this novella. Aside from Maryam, Hamid, and Zakaria, there's also time and desert. The desert is the desert that Hamid is crossing, and time is symbolized by this wall clock that is there that is there on the on the bed, like on top
Yep.
of the bed on which basically Zakaria and Maryam consummate their love. I mean whatever, like their marriage. So yeah, so there's a even though it's a very short piece of work, it's so complex also. It touches on so many different themes, and it goes really, really deep into some of them, and really takes them apart. And I think that is why it's such a powerful work, uh, both in terms of the use of its language, its imagery, and also like the relationship between Hamid and Maryam. The way that Kanafani talks about it, I just don't think I've ever seen a sister-brother relationship spoken about with such complexity and depth, by any author, forget Palestinian or not, anyone. So I really think that that's one of the triumphs of this book, is this kind of unpacking of this relationship of brother and sister, which is a relationship, relationships are not really that much of a focus in literature anyway. So yeah, but I want to turn it over to you, Reem. Can you share your thoughts about this novella? All that's left to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for asking me to read it again. I read it a long time ago in Arabic, and then I read it this time in English just to know the words I'm using. One thing I want to just point out that all the novellas that short stories that Ghassan Kanafani wrote, he wrote after he left Kuwait, so they were all in Beirut. But as you said, they were. There's a lot of impact of his past life in Kuwait, in Damascus, in Palestine, which are reflected in the story. So all that's left to you is not an easy read. It's absolutely not an easy read. You really need to read it at least twice. Want to know the plot of the story, what happens, and then next time to understand how it floats, because it doesn't float in a direct, structure. It takes you. It's like being. I mean, when I read it, I felt it's like being in a ship with a lot of waves around you.
Wow.
So once you're
Beautiful.
high on the tide, once you're down, and it takes you from one place to another, from one character to another, in a way that the first time it seems difficult, but when you read it the second time, it makes more sense, and you begin to understand how the confusion. It kind of depicts the confusion of the Palestinians, and it's this confusion, this feel of lost, feel of being in a diaspora, feel of losing everything, is all there in the structure of the story. As you rightly said, the relation between Hamid and his sister Maryam is a complicated one. First of all, for both of them is all that is left for each other. I mean, we understand from the novel that they are originally from Jaffa. They came to Gaza in 1948 when the Palestinian diaspora started. They lost everything. We understand that back in Jaffa, they came from a very good family. There was hope for them. Maryam was a very bright student, and there was hope for her to continue her studies, and she even know who she was going to marry, who is the brother of her friend. Yes, who was a good, a partner for her. So everything was set, and all of a sudden they lost everything. Their father died or was killed, martyred, And when they were forced out of Jaffa, they were on different. We understand that they came to Gaza by ship, and their mother was on a different
Yeah.
ship, and they lost her. You know, she was taken to Jordan. So in the end, it ends up that she, Hamid, and they had an aunt, her mother's sister, who then dies. She's old and she dies. So there was nobody left but the brother and the sister. And Mariam was older than Hamid. Hamid was like around 20. Mariam was like 35. So there's a
20.
gap at least.
Yeah. 10 years. 10
So,
years.
yeah. So there's like 15 years, almost 15 years gap between them. So she
Yeah.
was like, so she was like a mother figure to him, you know. And so she was the last protection for him.
Yeah.
And then the traitor Zechariah gets her pregnant, as you said, out of wed, which was devastating. I mean, in all senses, devastating. First, because of the figure that Mariam is for Hamid, and then because of the community. I mean, this is something don't forget. I mean, getting pregnant out of wedlock in the Middle East is something very huge. You know, it inquires honor killing, and he even thought of it once. I mean, we know that he even thought of it once. But then, I mean, when he understands, and especially Zechariah, I mean, there is also a stand against Zechariah, because Zechariah is the one who told the Israeli army of Salim. Yani, so he's a traitor at in all terms. So that was what pissed off Hamid also, that she did this wrongful action, and she did it with Zechariah. So
And
he
also
couldn't
he's
stand it
married with
anymore.
5 children.
Yes, but and they discovered that later on, that he's married and he
Well
has
said,
five
I
children.
agree with. It's a novel that should be read twice. I only read it once, but I thought about it quite a bit, and initially I didn't like it. I felt that Hamid was too harsh on his sister. Also, the language that Kanafani uses, like some of it is very like explicit, so it's and it's it's an Arab writer, so for me it took me a little bit by surprise that he was writing in this way and how it would have been received by readers, like talking about even Maryam in the way that Hamid thinks about her. It's quite unusual, or like explicit in a way,
Just
so
let
it
me
was
put
something.
a bracket, Bahir. When he speaks about Maryam in this way, it's not his own. Is not just his own, thoughts.
Mm.
It's what the community with. I mean, he's also explaining what the community thinks of Maryam. So it's
Yeah,
not his idea. It's what the
yeah, yeah,
community is thinking about
yeah.
her.
Yeah, yeah. And I think Miriam is also aware of that, like how she is going to be perceived, I mean, she understands the consequence of what she's done. Uh, so yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Like he thinks of it not just in terms of like how he feels. He feels betrayed by her personally, but also how what she has done affects his standing in Gaza, which is one of the main reasons why he leaves. Like he can't stay there because of her actions. Um, but yeah, so they both basically become estranged from their community in Gaza, which I think is like a second loss, because first they lost their home in Jaffa, and then they lost their family. Like their family just disintegrated. Their father was killed, and they lost their mother who lives in Jordan. And so basically their aunt's house, which is in Gaza in a refugee camp, it became like a second home for them. And then Maryam, because she had relations with Zakaria outside of marriage and got pregnant. Because of that, then he is forced out of his home. So I think maybe that leads to resentment. But I wanted to actually read a passage from this, and this basically is Mariam's voice. So again, like for people, like just to give you an idea, the novella goes between Hamid's voice and Mariam's voice, and then the desert's voice, and So it shifts basically. We're not just looking at things from just one perspective. So this is Mariam, and she's thinking about why she did what she did. Why is it that she made this huge decision that transformed their lives? So she's actually talking to Hamid in this particular passage. How can Hamid possibly understand? For all his wonderful manhood, he was my brother. He hadn't yet come to see how important the passing of time was. But to me, it was death announcing itself at least twice daily. I was gradually turning day by day into his substitute mother, while day by day he was becoming for me a man who was just a brother. He had never realized that for me a moment's encounter with a real man would lead to the dissolving of our bond and the small, beautifully shallow world we had forced ourselves to choose, a trivial world unprepared to accommodate another spinster. So what did you expect? So this is her, and this is when she is with Zakaria. She's thinking about Hamid and is thinking about her own actions. Let me just ask you, what did you think about the character of Mariam and the way that Kanafani wrote her? Is the way that he wrote her, is it different from other female characters that you've read in by other Palestinian writers or even Arab writers?
Yeah. I think what Kanafani was trying to show, both in Maryam and Imsad, the Palestinian woman who started as in a position of defeat. Sorry, just 1 second.
Yeah.
So like all other Palestinians, they are in a position of defeat. They are in a position of losing everything in their community. And being a woman in itself, having restriction from the community and society on women in certain issues, the gender dynamics and what is expected, the gender roles and what is expected of women and men to be, is very strong in Kanafani's characters, female characters, as in all other Arab writers. And in other Arab writers, most of the time they try to depict women either as strong women, forceful women, or as women who are subordinates, who are under the community's traditions, norms, etc. So it's either this or this. Here, I think Kanafani is trying to show how Palestinian women, despite everything, have remained strong. They have seen defeat. They have seen a lot of atrocities against them. They have been in a good place, then have been displaced from their houses, and have been have become refugees. But then, in what Maryam does, it shows that no, in the end, they have held on to they have the real powers. It was the same with Imsad, who started off also in a refugee tent, but then she was the one who was able to make her son become a fidai. And to say fidai at that time was to say that somebody is powerful, somebody is a resistance fighter who's going to fight for his land back. Also in the road to Haifa also. So the woman, despite the fact that she has lost her son, and she knows that she has lost him forever to the Jew family, but she still speaks that she has another son who will be a resistant fighter. So this is what Kanafani is trying to depict. I think he's trying to show that although seemingly Palestinian women seem to have lost it all, but then there's still power inside them. There's still courage inside them that comes out at the right moment. So so they are the let's say one of the beacons that that the Palestinian culture.
So I think that you're right. Like he complicates the idea of a woman, and I one of the things that that I read was that how Maryam is it's the way that Maryam like loses her virginity is basically similar to the loss of Palestinian land. It's a symbol of
Absolutely.
colonization, basically. And so while I agree with that assessment, and that was Shadi Naim. She wrote for this paper at the University of Jordan. So this is her assessment, like one of the things that she talks about. I think that Maryam is so much more than that. She's written in a way that's really like, I mean, that really complicates how women have been written. And I was actually very surprised that that Kanafani was able to get that insight as a straight man, like because when I hear him speaking in Hamid's voice, I understand that it's a man who is writing. But when he takes on the voice of Maryam, when he's writing from Maryam's perspective, I was really surprised at the depth of his understanding of what Maryam would be going through. Because she's not just presented as some kind of a victim, of course, as you have mentioned, that she's presented as this powerful woman who is able to make choices on her own, but she's also presented as a human being who realizes what she has done and realizes her mistake, and is suffering also, but not in a way which makes us feel sorry for her. It's more like it makes her very human, right? It makes her feel very human and very real in our eyes. Like, and also and one of the things that actually really like makes us feel that way is that she is thinking about how she impacts the other woman. you know the Zakaria's wife. She's like, I've basically, what have I done to their relationship? What is going to happen to his wife? So she has that empathy with her, so she's able to reflect on her own actions. So one of the thing is that, like, yeah, this is a Palestinian experience. This entire novella talks about, centers the Nakba, and says these are all events happening as a result of this horrific event that happened to Palestinians. And at the same time, it is able to give us characters who are so complex, so human, and they I don't want to say transcend their Palestinianness, but it's more that they're not just their suffering, they're not just their history. They are their history, but then it also goes beyond that. And that's where I think the experimentation that Kanafani was doing with this novel really kind of shines through, and especially at the end, which I want to read with you. But I wanted to, you can either continue with what you were, what if you wanted to add something to what I said, and then I wanted to ask you about Zakaria, who is one of my favorite characters, I've decided, because I
Yeah.
hate him.
Zakaria.
But I can also, again, like again, this novel, it presents us with two sides, or with so many sides. It's not just that, I mean, even if Hamid is like wants to kill his sister, we understand his desperation, and we understand his hurt. Like the fact that he just walks out of the door and Mariam is like, doesn't even say bye to him, and Zakaria just
Doesn't
shuts the
ask him
door on his
to come
face.
back.
Yeah,
He felt so wounded that she doesn't ask him to come back. She was waiting for her
yeah,
to ask him to come back, and she was waiting for him to come
yeah.
back at the same time. So
And
yeah, that's
and
the
she allows Zakaria to treat him the way that he does, to humiliate him. Like, those things, like, we feel for Hamid. We feel that, Hamid is like, and he's very young. He's a very young boy.
Mm.
He's not that old, right? He's in his 20s, right?
But then, according to what you just read about Mariam and how she explained that she's getting old, where and her brother is becoming more of, just a brother. You can understand Mariam that when she got pregnant, for her, despite everything, despite this tragedy of how she got pregnant, etc., that for her it's like, I'm gonna become a mother. Yani that was, I think that was the only hope for her at that time. At that time, her hope was that, well, everything is against her. Her brother, mother, there's no mother and father, no relatives. She's in Gaza, which is not her homeland. Abusive husband, and I assume she doesn't have a livelihood, opportunity, etc. So I think that she looked at it that this is the only hope for her, that she will have a child. And I don't think that the child for her is to get Zechariah to stay, to become more, to get tied up to her, but for her, that she will have somebody which is hers. This is the first time Mariam really feels that she will have something which is hers, which is which she will believe cannot be taken away from her. Yeah, so I think, I mean, and we should always remember, I mean, when we're reading this story or any other of Kanafani's story, we should always remember the context in which the characters are put. And we should always remember that they, in one way or another, they symbolize what has taken place in Palestine and what's still taking place. So we should, so they are not just a character, any ordinary character or any characters, out of context. On the contrary, they are characters which reflect exactly what's happening, all the despair, all the loss, all the atrocities. I like to use that word, which is happening, which happened and is still happening to the Palestinians.
First, I think I disagree with you a little bit, Reem, about Miriam and the thing that she wants a child. I actually think reading, I think she wanted to move forward in her life, whatever that meant. Like, if it was like, I think that if for Mariam, if there were more opportunities available for education or for a job or whatever in Gaza, she would have taken that. But this is what is available. Yeah, it's a way to move forward. I mean, and even like, I mean, like she talks about her virginity and her sexual desire, which I think was like, I was like, I mean, I have not read somebody speak about that in such an again, like, forget like any writer speak about it with such intensity. Like, she had this intense desire to be with somebody else, to not just be, as she has said herself, not just to be a sister slash mother to somebody, to have her own life. And if that meant going and, like, kind of being with this slime, Zakaria, like, so be it, like, I'll do that. And then I agree with you, once she has that baby, in her, then she kind of, I feel like she gets a little bit of clarity at the end, like when we see her fight Zakaria, like when he's threatening her with, like, you abort the baby or something, then she comes, like, she's like, no. And I agree with you. Then I think that she has this kind of purpose in the end, and I think, like, in a way, it's not just her defending the child, it's also her defending Hamid. It's kind of at the end, kind of realizing and standing up for him when the time that she should have, she didn't, but then she realizing, like, like, no. And even thinking about, like, she thinks about how she wanted to name her child Hamid. And then she starts crying, like, I mean, so, just I wanted. Do you want to read? Because I read one passage from All That's Left to You. Do you want to read a passage, one of your favorite passages from All That's Left to You?
Yeah, okay. So yes, I've wrote a few. Let me read. I mean, also going back to show how Kanafani is actually describing his own life. Remember when he meets with the soldier, the Israeli soldier, and they are in the desert. So and then he discovers, he takes his papers, and he looks at them in the morning when there's a bit of light, and he becomes, something comes up to in his, makes him tremble when he reads Jaffa. That's the only word that's
Yeah.
written in Latin letters, because the rest is written in Hebrew, which he doesn't understand and he can't read.
This is
So, and he
the
remembers because
card. This is the card on the soldier that he finds, the
the
Israeli
card.
soldier in
Yeah,
the desert.
and the what's Kanafani is trying to say is that that soldier is he remembers Menshia, which is in Jaffa, where he comes from. And Kanafani, when he left Jaffa, he actually left from Menshia. So this is reflecting really
Wow.
on his childhood, his self. Yeah. So he said, "Come, how did it all end up in the part of the city that used to be between the mosque of Sheikh Hassan, and between two brackets, Sheikh Hassan is Sheikh Hassan al-Jabi from the family." Sheikh Hassan.
Not you.
Yes, that's why I mean, personally, I'm also
Yeah.
yeah. And the burnt Jewish path in Al Manshia, and I read about Al Manshia. I read about the districts in Jaffa. And I understood that there were, I mean, in the late 18th century, there was still a war, the old wars, the Ottoman war, and then it became destroyed. It became torn down. So they brought down the old walls and they started to build different districts, like Ajami district, Jabaliya district, Minshia, etc. And one of the districts was for the Jews. I mean, there were Arab Jews living there. This is the
Yes.
interesting part. So there were Arab Jews living there, and they were, and Minshia was the biggest district where the Arab Muslims were mostly living there. But there were also Christian Muslims, Christian Palestinian living
Palestinian.
there. Yeah. So, so he said suddenly, and without exactly knowing why, I sensed that he understood me completely, that he was following my words closely and waiting for the upshot of it all. This could be intrusive conversation I went on because I know that neighborhood very well. We used to live there, but the effort seemed to be futile. At any rate, as far as he was concerned, all I intended to do was make it clear to him that there was nothing that merited his interest, that I wasn't harboring any concealed plan, and that if necessary, we'd be there until what? So also, this is where you start thinking yourself. So what will Hamid do with the soldier? So
Yeah.
he's in a position. This also, I think, is a reflection that he's not a murderer. He's not a criminal. You have this also the lot of the stereotype, Zionist stereotype that is that the Palestinian wants nothing but to kill the Jews and get rid of them. I think this is a strong indication that he doesn't want to kill him. But then what does he do with him? You think, yeah, I mean, you try to put yourself in Hamid's place and think, okay, I have this person who is with me in the desert. Now I have control over him because I have the knife. So he's my hostage. But then what do I do with him? Do I kill him, or what do I do with him? And if I don't kill him, I will be killed also, because at one moment, at any time, the army which he belongs to will find him, and for sure he will be killed with no hesitation. They will kill Hamid with no hesitation. So it gets you thinking. But then, I mean, also remember that he has a knife, Hamid has a knife, and he has an enemy in front of him. And remember that Maryam has a knife, and she has an enemy in front of her.
Wow, I
So,
did not make that connection. I'm so
I didn't
glad you're
read it.
here.
I just, yeah. So this is what I thought. Okay, so will he do what he? Well, I mean, is there
Wow.
indirect indication that he will do the same as his sister does, because we don't know.
Yeah.
But then I personally assume that this is an indirect indication by Kanafani that yes, okay, I'm not gonna read it out for you, but he is Mariam's brother. Think of what Mariam is doing and how she's protecting herself and how she's feeling powerful, and she's gaining her rights. And think of it also for Hamid, also in a way or another. So this is one of the stories that this is one of the parts that really got me thinking of the novel.
Yeah. Reem, thank you so much. Like this, I'm so what great insight that you've provided on this and the research that you did on the Al-Manshia district. I mean, that's something that I didn't know, and so I'm so glad. And the fact that this is so personal to Kanafani, that he himself, this is basically his lived experience put in his work, and of course, why not? I mean, it's a way for whenever we write, we try to put our own lives or try to understand our lives through our writing. So thank you
Absolutely.
for giving us that. I mean, really appreciate that. So I know that we're coming, like we probably are going to conclude this. I just wanted to I just wanted to share something with you, like something that I noticed even when I was reading Minor Detail by Dania Shibli, and then also All That's Left to You, is the fragmentary nature of the narrative, like how things are divided or and even suspended in time. So, like what you said, like like again, I didn't notice that both of them have this knife, yeah, and we're waiting for them to take action. One of them does, one of them doesn't, and it's a suspension. Like the novel doesn't provide us with these answers, like or a very clear end or a very nice end, like
Open-ended.
yeah,
Mm.
it's an open ending. Yeah, and even with Mariam, it's an open ending because we don't know what
Yeah.
happens after. We don't know how, if is she going to be, what's going to happen to her, what's going to happen to her child. We don't know. But yeah, so this idea of fragmented narrative, it's like the writer doesn't really try to guide us into a story, like it's not like we're opening and this is the scene or something like that, which is what classical literature usually does. And so I mean, this is not unusual in modern literature where, like, things just happen, like we open into action. But I think that when it comes to Palestinian writing, I wrote that, in Minor Detail and All That's Left to You, the way that they're written, it mimics Palestinian history and the way that it unfolded. Like, it was violent, it was sudden, and it was abrupt. Like the end happened very abruptly. Like people are being thrown out of their homes, and families suddenly being separated. So the suddenness is mimicked. It's kind of reflected in that in Palestinian literature, where we're suddenly brought into the middle of the conflict, in the middle of Palestinian experience, by these writers without like any kind of introduction, because that is how it has been experienced by Palestinians, like their displacement and the loss of their homeland. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to kind of put that out there, and I mean I've written quite a bit, but I wanted
Let
to
me
move
read
for
you a small paragraph related to this also. I mean, since you've spoken about this, if you remember, Hamid was talking to the desert when he said, only a short time ago, everything in the universe was completely against me. Everything that was happening in Gaza or in Jordan was working to my disadvantage. And I was rooted here in this very spot, in the worst place I could be, surrounded by loss from all sides. So let me tell you something important. I've nothing to lose now. And you are therefore no change of using, there's no change of using me to your disadvantage. So yeah, this is absolutely what Hamid, when he speaks with the desert, when he first goes into the desert, he speaks to the desert and tells and express how he feels lost. He feels that there's nothing more to lose than what he's already lost. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and And to add to that, I wanted to read, actually, I wanted both of us to read because we've talked about how we've touched on how this novel is more experimental or tries to explore things in a different way than Kanafani's other novels. To give people an idea of what we mean, I wanted us to read the last two pages of All That's Left to You.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. A dog started howling, and before long, the noise was coming from all directions. An extended sequence of howls. Through it all, I could hear a fiendish roar, but it was impossible to pinpoint the direction it came from.
Suddenly it moved for the third time. The tiny double movement inside me felt like a shudder. Then it moved downwards to my thighs and knees. I closed my eyes for an instant. Then he started up again mercilessly. Did you hear what I said to you? He shook me repeatedly, reiterating, Tell me you've understood. Abruptly he pulled me to him, then flung me towards the wall. Before he could turn round, I crashed into it.
With its long glowing blade, the knife flashed in front of me. There it is on the table. I came bouncing off the wall towards it, like a rubber doll. My fist grabbed the knife, each hand pressing on the handle, tense and sure of purpose. We rushed together in a head-on confrontation, each looking the other straight in the eye. The blade projected from my tightly closed hands.
I
I
felt
felt
it
it
now.
plunging.
Now it's me. I felt it
Yeah.
plunging into him as we collided together.
I mean, I don't know if you really. I personally didn't feel a sense of, so I didn't feel sorry for him at all, not at all. So
I
it's.
I
I mean,
see see like but okay. So first of all, Zakaria, like in Aligarh where I'm from, we have this medical shop, very famous medical shop called Zakaria, where we get all
Mm.
our medical supplies. But anyway, I liked Zakaria. I mean, I liked him because he is written so well.
Yeah.
He is the slime. But at the same time, it's like if one actually sees desperation, if we just look at it objectively, the person who's most desperate in this story is Zakaria because he has 5 children already. He works just as a teacher at a school. He already has a wife, and and he understands acutely the oppression of the Israelis, which is why he rats out Salim, who's, I think he's younger than him. Zakaria is an older person compared to Hamid and Maryam. So he has most of his life is behind him, right? So I feel like while Hamid and Maryam hope for a better future and try to make that happen for themselves, Zakaria is in the present and he wants to take whatever he can to make a better life for himself, and he is extremely selfish in doing that. But again, like, I just think that that's another, like, through him we see another aspect of Palestinian life, of refugee life, and of a life of people who have been oppressed and subjugated, that not everybody is a hero.
Yeah.
Not
Exactly.
everybody comes out of it without being corrupted in some way. And that's also the reality, like there's Zacharias in Aligarh, like, there are people who will ally with the powers to get their own personal agendas moving. And Zacharias may be a very small example of that. I actually find him, I feel sorry for him more than I hate him because, I mean, I partly feel sorry for him because I mean, at least Mariam, she knows what she wants, you know? She knows what she wants, or at least she knows what she doesn't have. She can understand that loss.
Mm.
She still remembers the Nakba, she still remembers the way that life was. I don't know if Zakaria still has that connection to that past. I don't know if he still remembers it in the way that both Mariam and Hamid remember it. I don't know what his backstory is, but So that's why I thought that he was a really important counter narrative to both Hamid and Maryam's kind of idealistic idealism, you know. I don't know. What do you think?
Absolutely, and I think because he did his first atrocity, his first act of becoming a traitor, and he knows that everybody خلاص hates him. So for him, he doesn't care anymore. يعني, that's what I find. يعني, and no, well, you remember when everybody was giving him the bad look after he called out Salim.
Yeah.
So I think, and he feel, I think his conscience just died. I think.
Yeah.
So I mean, because I mean, I think he just يعني خلاص said, okay, I'm the bad guy. خلاص, I'll
Yeah,
continue to
I'll
be
be the
the
bad.
bad guy. So that's why. But I know, I mean, I was trying to look for it. I know that for Kanafani, he did speak about the act of treachery. He did. For him, that was something. Yani you know, he hated the most. For it was something huge for him. So he really tried to, you know, show it, try to bring it out that those who commit treachery against their fellow fellows and
Yeah.
sisters, these are the worst. So for Kanafani, it's something huge that he wanted to show. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah. So I think, Reem, should we end? I wanted to read one passage. Um, and this is Hamid speaking to his sister. And I wanted you, or you can read this one, and I can read the one that that is in the from Marian's point of view. So the,
Okay, so I loved you as I loved myself, you worthless cow. I spent my days engaged in small services for you. I had hoped that one day, as a virtuous woman, you'd marry an honest man. But you opened your thighs at the first worthless man who came along. You let him make you pregnant without considering me for an instant, or his own situation for that matter. You are nothing but a slut. Both of you will rot in his pants. He'll share you both for his pleasure, and there you'll die. I'll tell your mother you died and I buried you inside the pants of a rotten man, together with the woman who born his 5 children and has a 6 on the way. Yeah, that was a bit strong, but I mean, you can understand. You know, you can understand the position Hamid has been put in.
yeah.
I mean, I
And
think, I
sorry,
mean, first,
Reem,
yeah,
before we talk about it, I wanted right after that, I wanted to read
yeah,
Mariam's just
yeah.
to let people. Okay, so can you just read the last line again? What was it?
Okay. So the last one was I'll tell your mother you died and I buried you inside the pants of a rotten man, together with the woman who has borne his 5 children and has the 6 on the way.
And now this is Mariam. He's made his distant mother a refuge for the future, and he's been so concerned with developing that fiction that he's forgotten to nurture himself. A man who'd grow up independent of the need for her. Poor Hamid. What did you really believe? That the plough should remain forbidden to this fertile earth? That I should spend all the days of my life subservient to your manhood? Conjuring out of your trousers a man from Jaffa called Fatih, the person who was going to propose to her before the Nakba, who silently and proudly had been preparing a dowry worthy of Abu Hamid's daughter? You poor wretch! Jaffa and Fatih are both lost forever. There's nothing left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Now, go ahead. What were you saying? That he is right, Hamid, you were talking about how Hamid is right.
No, I mean, Hamid, I mean, he's really put in a situation, a very difficult, complicated situation. I mean, because as we said at the beginning, that to become pregnant out of wedlock alone requires in our part of the world, in the Middle East, honor killing. So I
Yeah.
think it was, I mean, Hamid was expected to carry out the honor killing so that he relieve himself of this situation. But at the same time, I mean, this is his sister. This is the
Yeah.
only person he has left, yes. And also, I mean, to add into the fact that it's Zechariah, the traitor. Yeah, even I mean it's okay. I mean you do have it that if if a woman gets pregnant out of wedlock, they get married and everything is okay. But she lost her reputation forever. I mean, she lost, and to be married to this person, I mean, so she has lost. She has, hit bottom rock. Yeah, Mariam. So I think this is where Hamid understood that he couldn't take it anymore, and I think he was also afraid. What would he tell his mother? I mean, he would be blamed that he couldn't protect his sister, I assume, because I mean he's the man of the house. So he may be, his mother. If he did reach his mother, she would have blamed him. "Well, why did it reach this situation?
Yeah.
Why couldn't you protect your sister?" So I mean, it's not a really comfortable situation. But then again, remember, this is all symbol of what has taken place in Palestine, what has happened to Palestine. I mean, if you ask me, I would also tell you that, okay, Mariam could reflect Palestine, but then Zechariah could reflect the Arab
Hmm.
armies at that time, who were not able to defend. In fact, they made things worse for the
Yeah.
Palestinians.
Yeah.
So
That's
you
actually a
can,
really good point.
it's a,
Yeah.
it's a big symbol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, so let's conclude. I just wanted to end with this. Well, actually, I wanted to end with a question to you. So, after talking about Kanafani and speaking about him in depth, so what what do you think is his legacy? What does Kanafani, after reading all that's left to you, and I read also a letter from Gaza and a patient in bed 12. So, and you've read so many others of his work. What is it that Kanafani can teach us about the current time that we're living in? Like, what is it that you got from this novel that maybe helps you in some way to understand, deal with, or to fight against what's happening right now to Palestinians in Gaza?
As you probably well know, that a lot of those who are anti-Palestine, are all accusing of what's happening in Palestine, are taken back to the 7th of October, saying that it started with the attack on the 7th of October. I mean, I think Kanafani strongly show that no, he strongly shows how things started way
Yeah,
before 7th of October. He really not in a very tough, but let's say an everyday expression of the life of Palestinians. He shows what's happening to the Palestinians. Ghassan was able to take ordinary Palestinian characters, just the everyday people we meet on the street, and show the in-depth of these characters and what they're going through, to show the depth of their sorrow, the depth of their loss, and depth of the crisis that they are facing. So, and a crisis that is still going on, that we know that is still going on. So we just have to remember that whatever is taking place in Palestine today has its root for now almost 100 years, because it started way before, not even in 1948, it started way before 1948. I mean, Ghassan was born in 1936. For us, this is a symbol in itself, because in 1936 was the first attempt of Zionists to build settlement in Palestine, even before the establishment of the state of Israel. And also, I mean, at that time, I mean, as a Syrian, we have you do hear of Qassam Brigade, Brigade, but nobody knows that the Qassam Brigade is actually related to Izzeddin al-Qassam, who was a resistant fighter from Syria, from Jabi, Syria, who came to Palestine with troops and Palestinian troops who tried, I mean, the first massacre against villages in Palestine occurred in 1936. So, so this has been ongoing. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you, Reem. I just want to say thank you now, and like really, as always, you have really helped me as well as all the people who watch this and who will watch this to better understand the history of Palestine, and to place Kanafani in a context that helps us to again helps us to understand why these stories are written the way that they are, why they matter, and to connect also like Syria to Palestine, and to help us understand how the rest of the Arab world, at least Syrians, kind of talk about Palestine and view Palestine. And all of your other inputs that you gave really made this a very rich and very kind of a I learned a lot from you today, is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, I just want to add that, like, like Kanafani, like what he said, I think that we can all carry that forward in the sense that our art or whatever we do in life is not separate from our politics, which means that if we can, we should be talking about Gaza in whatever way we can, or doing whatever we can to help raise awareness about the genocide that's happening there. But I wanted to thank you, Reem, for your time, as always, for your words. Your presence is much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mahir. And I did learn a lot from you also. I absolutely learned a lot from you also. And thank you so much for having me. And hopefully, I mean, this would help. This would help in any way what's going on in Palestine. And a big thanks to all the students who are protesting around the world, in Colombia, in the US, around the world. A big solidarity, stand with them, and hope things will get better.
Yeah. Thank you, Reem. Bye, dear.
Thank you, dear. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.